Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of In Lay Terms. I am your host, Payman Ascari. I am joined by my good friend, Mr. JP Berg. How are you, JP?
Good, brother. Thanks for having me.
Anytime, as well as my good friend and whistleblower, Mr. Kirk Riese. Kirk, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again.
So, anytime, Kirk. We're going to jump right into it for the audience. Mr. Reese wanted to have a chat with Mr. Berg, JP, and I suggested that we do it on my show since I have a familiarity with Kirk's story, and I can kind of help guide it through. So, without further ado, let's go over your story, Kirk. And I'm gonna give the broad strokes, and then you can fill in the details. So, you were part of something called the Ranger Unit, and you guys go out there in the field and you do whatever you do. And before you go out, you usually um, you figure out, sorry, you go out, you figure out how much you spent, and then you'd invoice it. And then your leadership, whatever, they came to you and said, you know what, why don't you just assume what the invoice will be, and then we'll have it ready for you when you come. And then they got really dodgy and they said, you know what, why don't you just sign this invoice, and we'll worry about it, filling it out later. And then, like, miraculously, these invoices would go missing. So that's the beginning of your fraud story. What am I missing? What am I wrong?
Well, it's not really invoices. I guess so. It's we would sign. They're called EUR, equipment usage rates, where we would get $200 a day for a truck or $200 a day for a snow machine of our own personal vehicles to go on these exercises. And what was happening was, but plus we would also buy gas and food, but they would usually reimburse us, or we could use the government credit card. But when it came to the cash payments, they were all over the place. Like they would go into a room with one of us, and we would have our own private meeting. And sometimes they would fill it out. Sometimes we would just walk away. They'd just give me an envelope full of money. And I wasn't in it for the money, so I didn't really pay much attention. But then it became too obvious. And there was like 20 or 30 of us signing blank sheets when only 8 of us went on an exercise. And so that's like $100,000 in cash. And where's that money going? I got to shut off my computer and see myself here. But there's just so much wrongdoing. And I says, look, we used to get, or I asked for it to be direct deposit. And so, well, before emails and stuff, it would, like the northern communities, it was always cash. I said, well, now we have direct deposits. We can just get right to our bank accounts. And so they went to the direct deposit, and or for half of it, reluctantly. And then I went away for a year, and then when I came back, it was all cash again. Oh, you guys went back to cash. Like, it was just too obvious to me. So I started keeping track, and it become just too much. And I said, like, I can't work for corrupt organizations. I tried to report it. It didn't work.
All right. Before we get to the reporting, so that's just like the sort of issue thing.
Yeah.
JP, I'll throw it over to you, but I would say that the most important thing is that 20 people in, 8 invoices out. Like, what happened to those 12 invoices?
The whole thing that hits me right away with the story is like how rife this procedure is to be exploited. It's like it doesn't seem like there's oversight. It doesn't seem like there's like people watching this to ensure that there's not this occurring. And it just makes me wonder, the question that comes to mind, like, is this the standard across the line? Is this how these units of the Rangers function? Or is that unique to your situation?
No, I did talk to many, many Rangers. Like when I first started this 6 years ago, I got calls from all over the place, and they said, it's happening here. It's happening here. And then some other places would say, no, it's all on the up and up here. I'm like, okay, well, that's good to know. But it was more places like, yes, it's happening with us too. But the thing is that gets me is we actually had official government sheets to sign. Like they were made out exactly how we're supposed to fill them out. I never saw one of those for 9 years. The first time I saw one of those was in a quad exercise with Lieutenant Colonel Russell Meads, and I walked in to the office where someone was signing these sheets. I'm like, oh, wow, those look official. The gig was up right there. That James Vogel just glared at me because he knew I was coming for him, eh? And yeah, it was pretty intense soon after.
Interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't believe that we get paid cash. Well, yeah, we do. Oh, it's government. They won't do that. Well, I'm not lying, guys. They come with ammo boxes of $100 bills when they came up, because he does a whole circuit around the north. And most of the northern ranger patrols are all commanded by the chief, or their husbands or wives. It's kind of weird like that.
Any follow-up questions, or you want to move on?
No, I'm good to good to go through.
So before we do that, Prairie, hello, how's it going? And for anybody watching, we got 100 people watching. If you could share the stream, that would help get Kirk's message out and grow our numbers. Here we go. So the next thing that happened is you try to escalate this up the chain of command. It really goes nowhere. Somebody apparently tried to bribe you. I'll let you speak to that. You tried to run for a leadership position. You kind of got shafted, and then you got sidelined or removed from the unit.
Yeah.
What am I missing?
No. Yeah. See, so we're supposed to have elections every 2 years, and that's supposed to be across the board. For example, we had a section patrol commander and a 2IC, second in command, and then we had, I think it was 4 section leaders, which I was a section leader, which is a master corporal, and then I have a second in command, which is a 2IC. But what happened was I questioned all these monies, and we were supposed to have an election, but they canceled the election. It was supposed to be in October, and they canceled it. I'm like, okay, well, that's weird, because and it was in October when I filed my complaints to the Civilian Review and Complaints Committee about the RCMP not investigating my complaints about this fraud. So it all had, and then I told the commanding officer, I says, I made a complaint to the ombudsman. I was immediately suspended for a year, but again, so they canceled the whole election. But I was waiting for him to come up in December when the the sergeant major finally came up. I sat with him in the motor inn and I showed him a few documents, and he says, holy shit, you're back in. You got to expose this. There's the election coming up in 3 days, or it's supposed to be election coming up, and so he sent everybody the election rules. It's for everybody. He sent everybody so that there was no questioning that they had it, which is, he did that for me so that they couldn't say they didn't know. But what they did was they wouldn't let me back in. He says I'll leave it up to the patrol to see how they handle this. And the first thing he said, okay, Kirk's back in. The first thing they did is, okay, we're having an election for Kirk's space. He's no longer section leader, and that's against our constitution. So I'm like, holy shit. And I had a cop, like an RCMP member. He was in my section, and he actually stayed at my house when we were doing our shooting, like our rifle training and stuff like that. And he says, Kirk, you have to report this. Well, I phoned 911. I said, this is career ending. These guys are harassing me, trying to make me, I phoned 911 and reported this at his request. And the RCMP turned it around on me, saying I was harassing my patrol commanders. So that was in December of 2018. And then my sergeant major said, Kirk, just wait till Mohegan comes up in January. We'll sort this out. So he's just cool your jets. So I kind of sat there stewing. I waited for the election to come up, and they wouldn't let me vote. They were supposed to have an election that night in the Legion, which they canceled. So they had this fake election on exercise in uniform. So that is a code of service discipline violations, and they went against every one of our constitutional election processes. They allowed phone-in votes to the chief's husband only. They allowed. They didn't allow paper ballots. Everything was open. There's no everyone knew who voted for who, right?
Let's let JP respond. That's
Okay.
a lot of info. So JP,
Yeah.
what do you want to? Any questions?
Yeah, I'm just in awe of it. Again, more so from a procedural standpoint. Like it's and not to make light of it, but I mean it's like it's done at the Legion. Like that's such a Canadian thing. Like I mean, it's very surprising, and where my mind continues to go is like this is in my estimation not something that's isolated. I would say fraud like this is widespread, and there's a lot of people that are benefiting from the corruption. But I have no questions, more just those comments, so I'm good to move along.
All right. Before we do, Peggy says, hi, oh my God, I needed you guys today. We're here for you, Peggy. JP, I know you follow Peggy. Do you follow Peggy as well?
I can't see that small.
Oh, okay. It's just somebody JP and I know.
Oh, good.
I think I already said hello to Prairie. Lori, thank you for reposting the stream. If everybody else could repost, we'd appreciate that. Where was all this taking place again? Saskatchewan?
That was in Laurent, Saskatchewan, murder capital of Canada, and Trudeau's Truth and Reconciliation poster town for Canada, with his corrupt Liberal band chief Tammy Cook Searson, and
And
her
you were
husband Jim Searson, the head of the Red Cross for Northern Saskatchewan. Like, it's just too much.
you stepped in it, Kirk.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go through this in a little bit of more detail because you and I have probably spent like 20 hours working this out. So after these shenanigans, you try to blow the whistle on the fraud. So we're only focusing on that fraud
Yeah.
element. You went to the Canadian Armed Forces, they ignored you. You went to the RCMP, they said they would investigate. You went to your MLA, and the MLA is like, it's federal, not provincial. You go to your federal MP, it says it's not their ministry. You go to the Ministry of Defense, they say nothing to see here. You went to the opposition parties, they all said, it's not our jurisdiction, nothing we can do. Go to the ombudsman, they're all useless anyway. And then you went to the media, but the media they're only interested in clicks. So somebody like me that's small is the only one that will get you on.
100%. And the amount of media and every time I see them on TV, it reminds me to keep going, because all they do is spread the propaganda. I'll be Jose Barrera with CBC. All he does is cases like Aboriginal cases, mostly where they're treated supposedly unfairly. But he won't share my story. And he said, I want to find out about far right supremacy. And all my stuff is on my X and Facebook. But once I told him it involved a band chief, he didn't want to have anything to do with it, So it's just there's so much people that are just protecting their jobs, their careers, their families, But sorry, I'm getting off track. Go ahead, Payman.
JP?
I can't remember.
It's just funny. It's just to serve the narrative, right? That's the typical corporate press. They're looking for a story that involves far-right extremism in the Canadian Armed Forces, clearly. And if it doesn't fit the criteria for that narrative, then they're not interested. Especially something like this that actually turns it on its head, right? It's kind of shows some corruption with First Nations. I could see why the corporate press would steer away from that, knowing how just irredeemably corrupt they are.
Well, it's odd you mentioned that, because I recall the one thing when I was talking to Sergeant Major Gilliard there in the motor, and I said, this is going to set the natives back 20 years if this gets out. And I didn't want that. I wanted it done internally, And unfortunately, with this escalation over the last 6 years, it made it astronomically worse because of the other chiefs I contacted, and they all know my story. Not one of them will say the thing. Like, it's all, I'm not going to get into conspiracies, but the WEF, I was offered a password and pre-approved already for the Great Reset. It's just so weird. But people can't believe what's happening. But we got the documents. Cognitive dissonance is something that someone always says, and that is just amazing. Like, I could look someone in the face and tell them my story, and then they'll just say, but you'll fix my toilet today, right? Like, I'm getting calls today already, but they don't want the truth. It's too scary. But people are suffering, man. And again, thank you guys for having me on. So, any questions?
It's my pleasure, man. I don't necessarily think I think a lot of people just truly feel ineffectual. Regular people, even a lot of people on social media, they feel like, what could I do with something like this, right? Now I came on, I wanted to talk to you just to bring more of an audience to your story. But as for me having any expertise on any of this, I can't offer anything. I want your story to get out there. I would love, and I would appeal to anyone watching, like anyone in the Canadian Armed Forces that has some sway, like if you could see this and intervene on this gentleman's behalf, because he's received a lot of doors slammed in his face. He's received a lot of people that are just very quick to dismiss him. And I think it's people like Kirk Riese that are going to expose the corruption. If we're going to get anywhere, we have to thoroughly look at the people that are making these claims, and we have to analyze their stories. So I'm just glad I could help reach it out to my audience, and I'm glad Payman was able to come and act as a conduit for it, because it is a very complex story when you get into it. I've followed it a bit.
Well, here's the thing: is there's other Rangers that have complained too, of different things, and they made international news. Eric Mygland, like, I know him personally, very high-strung, very good man, very Canadian, But I can see how he could be, he's very forward, but I think he's a great guy. I went to shooting school with him, and he called Trudeau a treasonous bastard, and they ruined his life. They raked him over the coals on CBC, And he sent my son a Christmas or a birthday present the first year I was in exile. He's the only one that I still have contact with out of the whole military, except for a guy named Derek in the bread space. But all these guys, I thought they would all stand up for me. Like, I'm just a ranger. I'm a nobody. Like, I just taught survival skills. I'm not a killer. Domestic protect domestic sovereignty is what we're supposed to do. And I thought these guys would be my saviors.
Let's Kirk, let's realign here for a moment.
Yeah.
Chris Erickson, keep up the great work, guys. Thanks, Chris. Thunderbird World Media, thanks,
Yeah, hi,
Pimmascari,
Thunderbird.
for sharing anytime. And Thunderbird World Media, thank you for sharing my content from time to time. Peggy says, yes, Kirk, we follow each other. One thing I wanted to add, JP, this is sort of directed to you. I think I've talked about this with Kirk. There's certain areas where if whistleblowers go into it, they'll get pushback. One is government. One is the tribes, which is part of government. Then you have law enforcement. Then you have the military. And then you have organized crime. The more of these you inadvertently step into, the more trouble you run into. And I think Kirk has gotten into the four of them: law enforcement, military, chiefs, government. And I suspect also organized crime, but he doesn't know it. I'm guessing maybe there's some organized crime going on.
The CRA is definitely organized crime, so I'm well into that. But yeah, I wasn't expecting this, but I was ordered to do it. Like, Kirk, you got to expose this. So eventually I'll show you guys our correspondence between the sergeant major and I. He says, okay, this is between you and me. You're excused for a year. I says, I have to prove as bad as it is, like as bad as I can. And wow, did I underestimate, But those were my orders. I'm still following them. We got to get someone in politics to open their eyes and to finally say, okay, enough is enough, and who's that person going to be? I always think it's going to be one of us, but we never get a chance. And it seems that the only people that get a chance to be nominated, like I contacted the Green Light Committee for the Liberals to warn them about Chief Tammy Cook-Searson. I contacted Trudeau himself to warn him about Chief Tammy Cook-Searson. I got responses, Trudeau says that falls under the purview of Harjit Sajjan, Minister of National Defense. And they all say, yeah, we're looking into it. They're not. And then all of a sudden, I phone the office. Oh, no, he's no longer Minister of National Defense. He's running for...
they keep moving him around.
Yeah,
JP,
that's the thing. And then I have to go after Anita Anand. And, well, first it was Jody Wilson-Raybould, and then Harjit Sajjan, and then Anita Anand, and then Bill Blair, And
they tried to tire you out. I get that. I just
yeah.
want to see if JP has any follow-up.
No, I'm just, again, I'm in awe, and it's like I said with this story, it's shocking to me, and at the risk of repeating myself, my mind just goes to like, how unique is this story? Like I just got a feeling that this is very widespread, this very similar type of corruption. These institutions not looking at each other. I mean, there's no accountability in any realm of Canada, it seems. You just look at the way the scandals in the last government went down. Like, they were all brought to light and not one of them were investigated. They investigate themselves and then they make a standard release. Yeah. It's all what I would expect to see in a totalitarian society.
Authoritarian too, as well. Yeah, like I thought the doctors when I was arrested and sent to the mental hospital, I thought
wait, you're skipping ahead. Okay, I'm going to take over again.
I was testing this, payment.
Yeah, I'm on the ball. If everybody could share the space, we'd appreciate that. Now, the next part is the retribution. There's 3 parts in this. The one is the threats on your life, which force you to flee. The second one is the CRA action. The third one is the drugging under the BC Mental Health Act. Let's take this one by one. What was the nature of the threats against you?
Kirk, you're stepping on too many toes. This is from Warrant Officer O'Hagan when he came to the hotel room January 17th. 17th, 2018 or 2019. Kirk, and I'm telling him I was gonna quit, and then he said I had to quit. Kirk, you stepped on too many toes. You have no idea how many toes. I'm like, that's not my problem. He's like, Kirk, think of your babies, think of your children, because and I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, I was mad now. I was like, I am thinking of my kids. I'm thinking of everyone's kids. Like, this is completely wrong. You can't imagine the amount of death in Laurent, Saskatchewan, ODs, murders, suicides. It is through the charts. And I'm trying to avoid that, right? But he's telling me just to quit, and I'm not going to quit. So he said, well, you're going to get voted off. So they had that illegal vote, got me voted off, and he came to my house to get my gear, and he says, I think it's time to take a holiday, under his breath, because he knew I was recording everything, but and it just, and I was right. So many people have died since. It could have changed the whole narrative of COVID, if the corruption got out. But sorry, what was the question again?
Okay, so let's go through the three parts, and then
Oh.
JP, I'll pass it over to you. The CRA. What happened to you in your house in the CRA?
Okay, I couldn't get my T4s from the military, so that was one of the reasons I didn't do my taxes. Besides, I went through custody fights, so I was pretty broke. But either way, I knew I was making money. I knew they'd get money in the end. So I just didn't do my taxes, and I asked for my T4s from the military. They say you don't get any. I thought, well, that's pretty weird. And then I started connecting the dots, and then I knew it was corrupt. And I said, okay, well, I didn't do my taxes, so they seized it was like 140 at one time, and it ended up being around $350,000 up until 2019. They would seize everything, and I knew I'd get that back. I thought this would all get sorted out. So it's just money in the bank, gaining interest is how I saw it. I was able to get, they seized my accounts like over and over and over. Every time I got any military pay, they would seize it. They were just trying to ruin me, right? But I was able to survive, did the odd cash job, sold some of my stuff, like my toys and stuff, Harley and stuff like that. But they weren't killing me. So they had to try harder. And then the threats came, right? So yeah, the CRA and then I finally did I got my T4s, which were, I would say bogus, but I signed them anyways because I was like out of the mental hospital. I wanted to be done with this. But so I did my taxes. They said, okay, you owe us $60,000, give or take. I thought it would be around 50. I said, well, just take it out of the $350,000 you seized. And they said, we have no record of that. I'm like, and then I'm like, wow, this is really, really choice. They sure got me good. I wasn't anticipating that. I always thought that would be, oh, we fucked up. Here's your money back with interest, compounded daily, right? But I hired accountants. They couldn't find it. And then, like I told you about Chad Arrows. Did I mention that today?
Well, hold on before we get there. JP, anything?
No, I'm curious, just listening.
Okay, well, one more thing is, I'm phoning CRA to get my money back. Like, I'm like, yay, I'm in exile. I can finally get my life back and at least get my bank accounts back. I had no idea they would eventually seize my house because I would never be able to get that money back. And here's the thing, I was making payments on my house. I had a renter in there and he missed a payment. He was just paying the town. And they said, okay, the deal's done. I'm like, what? But they were trying to get me to gift the house. And then they were trying to get me to sell it to them. And then they just said, okay, well, here's a $15,000 bill for cleaning up your yard. We're going to now take your house for back taxes. And I can't I can't pay $50,000 for my taxes because they won't give me back my money. And even if I did pay that money, I'm sure the CRA would put another lien on it anyways. So, did I lose you?
Anything, JP?
So now you attribute this like they're targeting you specifically because of your whistleblower activity. So it would kind of indicate like interagency corruption or collusion in some regard. And
then when I phone the next week to see she no longer works here, and then you have to explain again. And then, and it's just like, and that's, it's like bang, bang, bang. And then finally I got a hold of somebody and, well, actually they audited me in 2020 or 2020. And they audited me and they said, okay, you owe us 60,000, whatever. And then, but they sent me a $22,000 check for my company, but it was in my company name that they closed. So I couldn't cash it. So I said, can you resubmit this into Kirk Riese? This other new man that I talked to, let me pull up your account. He's like, it shows here you lost $22,000. I'm like, what? And I'm stressed to the max. Like the first 3 years were the worst. I'm like, oh my God. And then he starts saying, okay, I'm going to send you documents. You're on disability. Okay, we're going to start clawing that back to pay this $354,000 off. I'm like, what? It's just, they don't know what's going on there. And, I can phone them. I gave this lady the accounts that this money and the amounts and the dates these were taken out of. And she says, oh my God, there it is right there. It's so weird. I can't see that. I said, well, then give it back. She says, oh, I'm not in the refund. I'm in the take part, you know, the payments, the collections. And I just get batted around. And finally, you know what? I think the best way to deal with this is by people like yourselves. And then eventually they're going to say, you know what? I think we have to figure out Kirk's story. I hope. And that's my dream. You know, and that's every whistleblower's dream, is to never tell our stories again. But we do want them to stop happening from other people.
So that's your current status now. You're essentially heavily indebted to the Canadian government with this tax debt.
No, because Chad Arrows, Chad was being basically interrogated by a bunch of the Freedom Convoy people in a space. So I followed him after that, and he defended himself very well. I'm like, this guy's not corrupt. He sounds good to me. So I phoned him up and I says, hey, I got this weird story and a weird tax thing. Can you help me with it? And he says, sure. You got to authorize me to be your representative for CRA. I did that. Out of the goodness of his heart, you know, and then he phoned me back 2.5 hours later. He says, I found that $350,000. I'm like, what? You know, how come these other guys that I paid $4,000 or $5,000 didn't? How come they didn't? You know, well, either way, he said, okay, well, I said, well, we'll deal with this. I'm just trying to deal with other stuff. And then he says, okay, well, I'm going to get the penalties dropped, because you shouldn't have to pay these penalties, because I couldn't get my T4s and all that stuff. So they actually dropped like $33,000 worth of penalties. But it brought my balance down to like zero or something, or 60 cents or something like that. I'm like, okay, well, where's the $320,000 plus interest at 5% daily compounded for the last, 6 years, 10 years? You know, that's a lot of money. But you can't get a hold of anybody at the CRA anymore. So yeah, it's a weird story. But you would think CRA would send someone over and say, let's figure out Kirk.
I would think this would be thoroughly investigated. I would just assume that. I think most people would make that assumption, and it's not a safe assumption to make in this country anymore.
Well, now they're threatening to do everyone else's taxes for them. Like, Jesus, you know.
Automatically. Yeah. And that's clearly for their benefit. Anything they do is not to help you.
Well, then they can hire a bunch more accountants, and the bureaucracy goes on, eh?
Certainly does.
So we're just going to move on to the last part. Before I do, Peggy says, same with the play of moving the puppets through different agency roles, historically accurate. This is the thing about how the people change. She's saying they cycle into the other departments.
Catholic Church did that too. Anita Anand, that's a good one, because there was another whistleblower on with Pamela Forward on Whistleblower Canada, another military whistleblower, and he also has Anita Anand in his story. He also has Lieutenant Colonel Russell Meads in his story. It's very odd that they would all, we have connecting dots. And like I told you in the Rangers, there was Eric Migland, good guy, and there's another guy, Corey Huron. He drove through the gates of Rydoo Hall trying to arrest Trudeau. Like, I don't agree with that plan, very whatever. Not something I would have done. I don't know him personally, but he has contacted me about a month ago, and he says, Kirk, I hear you're another Ranger that's been screwed around. I'm like, yeah. He says, what happened? He's like, holy shit, He says, well, the story that you hear on the news isn't the story that is the truth. I'm like, I didn't think it was, but I tried to report when he was arrested. I was trying to phone the media that were sharing the story. I have the emails back and forth, and they would never contact. I said, I can help Corey Huron with his case.
Well, we're fighting. It's not like we're fighting a legitimate, or you're fighting a legitimate government. This is a criminal organization, is what I'm coming to realize. The media is their PR division, the military, law enforcement, government, the tribes. These are just different departments within this massive mafia.
Yeah, and I was always raised, the government. We're taught that in school. The government is honest. The police will help you. Everyone looks after each other. Well, it's not like that anymore. And we got to get back to helping each other. And I hate to say it, but we got to start exposing more truth.
So, just in wrapping it up, I'm going to reiterate this. This isn't something I just thought of off the top of my head. You got the government, law enforcement, military, tribes that are in government, and organized crime. And like, the more of these you hit, the more feathers you ruffle.
Oh yeah.
The more intense the pushback. So I'm going to throw it back to you, Kirk, to wrap it up. But just Kirk Riese is one. Luke Saborin, for example, is another one. He's a whistleblower for CBSA. they went after him pretty hard too.
Yeah, and I don't recall seeing his story on the news. Just a
No?
blurb, and that's the thing is they'll do this little blurb, or it'll be on the scrolling underneath, so they can say it was reported, and then it's forgotten. And the thing is, like, we got to keep telling the stories of Luke Sabron, Sue Spruill, David Drover, Kirk Riese, myself, Marianne. Like, there's so many people that are suffering because they're not sharing the truth. Everyone's getting these half truths, and if the real truth came out, it would really wake up Canada, and then we could get back to resolving things. And the only way to do that is by, the public has to know. So we just got to share these stories out. I know I sound like a broken record, but even our platforms are restricted now. We can't share the news in Canada. The Americans hardly believe what's going on up here, but everyone else thinks we're a great country, and we could be. But we just have to get rid of arrest a few corrupt people. And guess what? The rest are going to follow suit. They're going to either straighten out or they're going to face the consequences of poor choices. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, just in closing again, like I was on here more as an observer. I know Kirk. I became friends with him just interacting with him on X. But where this is kind of out of my realm of expertise, I do want to appeal. Like my whole role in this, in my eyes, was just to bring more eyes to the story. I share Kirk's stuff when I see it. But I would like to appeal if there's anyone out there that has some knowledge that could potentially help Kirk. Anyone who has any position in Canadian Armed Forces that coincidentally is seeing this broadcast, if you could reach out to Kirk Riese, I think that's paramount if we're going to get any transparency back, is to actually have these things thoroughly investigated by impartial parties. Like back in the era where there really was media, you would have an investigative journalist that would love to do a story like this. They'd contact all the whistleblowers. They draw the parallels between them. Someone like that. But like I say, I just want to anything I could do to help get the word out, man.
Well, that's the same thing. I'm sharing your stories. Of course, you help us, we help you. And that's the thing is, like, the Fifth Estate, they know all about my story. They say, hey, Kirk, how's it going today? I sent them my stuff and then blocked. And it's like that pretty much every year when somebody says, are you still alive? I'm like, yeah. Like, even politicians are like, how's it going? Anything resolved yet? No. Click. Green Party, I got the Liberal Party, I got the NDP Party, all recorded. None of this stuff is disputable. Like the recordings are on most of my X and my Facebook before they get erased. So
the corruption is so bad in Canada now. It's like towards the end of the Soviet Union, where everyone just knows how corrupt it is, and they're just going along with the motions. That's the impression I get with a lot of these people that are involved personally. Like, it's just the way it goes. It was corrupt before they got there in their estimation, and they're just getting theirs.
They're hoping they don't attract attention to themselves. And that's why like Payman, I think you asked me what the hell happened yesterday we had a bunch of back and forth on X there. That proves a good point. There's a lady, she was attacking me, and she's a friend of my friend. And he says, I don't want to get involved. And that is the problem with Canada. His friend is causing it. Like, I think she's wrong and she's lying, but he doesn't want to get involved because it'll involve him. And well, I didn't want to get involved because it involved my best friends too, but avoiding being a whistleblower isn't going to help the situation. So right there, he just proved, what, both of you guys aren't for Canada, you're for yourself. So stand up, even if it is against your friend, or ask your friend, why are you doing what you're doing? Why aren't you sharing this story? Why are you hiding this? Why aren't you why aren't you complaining to your MLA or your MP? The answer will be like, what can one man do? Well, three can do 3 times as much.
Well, there you have it, Kirk. This was a short episode, but I think it was good because we got through it really quick and we told your story. So now you have a shorter version if you want to share it.
We'll share it, of course, but we also need to share the documents sometime.
Well, we do, but that's for you and me. JP will fall asleep. That's professional.
Well, yeah, and I would recommend maybe attaching some of them to the bottom of this stream, Kirk, in case someone who's watching.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely will
see them. That's a good idea for sure. Thanks for coming on with us, Kirk, and telling your story, man. I'm very glad I could help in any small way. I'll continue to share stuff, and hopefully you get someone that'll actually address this and thoroughly investigate it for you.
Yeah, well, defend the defenseless, help the helpless, and protect the children. And if you can't, then let us. Amen. And bless you both. Thanks
Here,
again.
here.
God bless,
Just in
brother.
closing out the podcast, Thunderbird World Media says these grassroots X Spaces convos, etc., need to be shared, peeps.
I concur.
Thanks,
I agree.
Thunderbird.
All right. Thank you very much to the audience. We got 320 people. That was a good turnout. JP, Kirk, thank you very much. Kirk left. See you later, JP.